What's good? You are now rocking with the Bigs alongside Nick Mariano. I am Herb Howard. We are checking in from Indianapolis here at the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. Lots of things going on. Lots of coaches and GMs who will be addressing the media as the day goes along. Earlier today, we had an opportunity to hear from Bears GM Ryan Poles.
We did, yeah. So it's been an eventful day, and we got about 15 minutes with Ryan Poles. Not in this area, actually. He likes to do his stuff a little
exclusive.
Very exclusive, a little secretive, Ryan Poles. But we did get to hear from him earlier today.
It was really cool to hear from him. It's an interesting period, I think, in terms of trying to hear from the GMs because it's not necessarily one of their usual lying periods where they're trying to hide everything. It's like it's not really much to hide right now. They don't really know much. They're still evaluating free agency, evaluating the draft. So it's not like they're necessarily lying to you per se. And it's an interesting place because they usually are.
Exactly, yeah. There's more information to be gained for them, so they just haven't gotten to that point yet. So I think just for what they're doing, it's like they have to be as honest with us as they can be without actually lying, like you were saying.
Yeah. So not a bad deal, but I did take away a few things that he did speak on. I thought it was very important that he talked about his approach in free agency. Shout out to Chris Emma who asked him about his vision for free agency in terms of going after the big targets in free agency. And Ryan Poles said that the clearer the vision is for the team, the more aggressive they can be. He said if a player checks all of your boxes, there's really no reason to hold back. You can go ahead and be aggressive. Now, obviously, everybody's talking about Trey Smith and what that may mean. And if he checks all the boxes like we think he checks for the Bears, one, a need in terms of position, but also his attitude, his physicality, all the things the Bears talked about, there should be no reason for them to hold back.
Yeah, I think it was encouraging to hear that from Ryan Poles to see how he could approach it. But I want to touch on like that clear vision part because that seemed like an emphasis for this new coaching staff. They're kind of learning each other, trying to understand what exactly Ben Johnson wants. What does Ryan Poles need to see from his eyes to align with Ben Johnson? And that clear vision seems to be really the emphasis right now as they're trying to figure out a bunch of stuff, Herb. So if they can be on that page from the get-go when they start evaluating these prospects, they can understand, well, this is the vision that we talked about earlier. Now we can know which prospects we're actually looking to go get.
Makes a ton of sense, man. Their vision has to include improving the defensive line. He was asked about whether or not he wants to go about improving it through the interior of the defensive line or the exterior. Shout out to Kevin Fishbane who asked that question. Ryan Poles said you really need someone to really puncture the offensive line from the interior, and then that will allow you to be able to be successful in terms of getting production from the outside as well. So he seems like you really got to get somebody from the interior. Now, I don't know if that means he thinks he has those people in terms of Javon Dexter and Billings and some of the other young guys where he thinks he needs to add there before he adds to the edge. Either way, we know the Bears need help on the defensive line.
No doubt about it. And speaking of that defensive line, there's a lot of things that the Bears don't know at this point. But what they do know is that given their needs and the supply that is in the draft or free agency, they feel like they can address that defensive line position. So whether that is in free agency or through the draft, there are going to be guys that they're viewing at this early process right now that feel like they could be a fit for the Bears as they look to bolster that defensive line and give Montez Sweat more help.
He definitely needs some help. I think one of the things that will add to their ability to be flexible in the approach, especially with the draft and free agency, Nick, is what they decide to do about Braxton Jones at left tackle. If he's going to be their left tackle for this season, then I think they can focus on the interior offensive line and then get onto the defensive line. Brad Biggs asked Ryan Poles about Braxton Jones specifically. Ryan said he performed well last year. Obviously, you don't want to see guys get hurt. He said we got to have to see how he comes out on the other side of this injury. But right now, they think he's on schedule and on target for where he should be. He then did go on to say that position is going to be one of competition as they try to figure out who the best 5 offensive linemen will be to put out on the field in front of second-year quarterback Caleb Williams.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting with Braxton Jones. I feel like you go on Bears Twitter, Herb, and a lot of people want him out, but for a guy that was a later round pick, like that's a guy that I think has earned another year to see what he can do if you give him better offensive linemen around him.
Lots of things going on from here at the Indiana Convention Center here as the NFL Combine kicks off. Lots of activity going around. You guys saw the dogs and security come through a little bit earlier. Now we can do about that. You got to let the K9s do what they do.
Yeah, man. They got to do it. Yeah. Got to make sure everyone's safe.
You got to keep everybody safe, man. But we'll have a lot more coming to you all as the week goes on. We're going to hear from Coach Ben Johnson a little later on today. We'll come back and check in with you guys then. For now, that's Nick. I'm Herb. It's the Bigs. What's good? You are back rocking with the Bigs as we keep things rolling from here in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. Nick, we had a chance to hear from Coach Johnson today. Obviously, we heard from Ryan Poles earlier. But what did you hear from Coach Johnson as we had a chance to speak to him a little bit?
Yeah, we got a chance to talk to him and, in the podium setting there. But there's a lot of things said. But I think what stood out was that he went out of his way to hire people on this coaching staff that weren't his friends.
Yeah.
He wanted to get different ideas, different energies he talked about into the building at Hallis Hall so that, to learn off of some of the guys that he brought in, like a guy like Eric Bieniemy, what he brings to the run game that he didn't have in Detroit. So it was interesting to hear that he went with that route to hire some of the people at his coaching staff.
Yeah, and that collaborative nature of his, approach, we keep hearing about that. We just bumped into a reporter that covered the Lions. That was the first thing he said, the collaborative nature that he brings and wanting to have different voices and different opinions and different approaches for how they want to build what ultimately is going to be his system, but it's a collaborative approach to doing it.
Absolutely.
One of the things I was very, very intrigued by that I heard from him was talking about the player acquisition, right? Obviously, the Bears needed a new head coach because they are not in a great space right now. So you're going to bring some players in with that as well. And he talked about just having the entire coaching staff sit down with the entire personnel department and go through player by player, position by position, what the ideal athlete would look like for that position, what height, what weight, what speed, what type of makeup they will have. And I think that's really, really important. I should have followed up. If I was any good at my job, I would have said,
which you are.
What percentage of the Bears' current roster fits the mold of those players that you're looking for? But he knows what he wants to look for. He's expressed that to Ryan Poles. I thought that was really important.
Yeah, and I think that all goes back to the vision that they're all trying to get on the same ground. What they're looking for in players, that body type, things like that. In terms of also players that the groups are looking at, the offensive line, and Ben Johnson was asked, is it realistic to think that you can overhaul the 3 interior positions right now? And he said that it has been done before. He cited what the Carolina Panthers were able to do, getting some big guards in there and, really restructuring that offensive line to what it is today. So obviously that'll be huge of importance for Ben Johnson in his first year as a head coach. He knows what he had in Detroit, some of those guys on the interior and also at the tackle positions. But he does believe that you could rehaul that position and make it a strength.
And that goes with what Ryan Poles said earlier in the offseason. He said, I do believe that we have the resources to be able to flip this offensive line. And he thinks that some things line up well with what they want to do in terms of free agency and the draft. So we'll see how that goes about it. But Coach Johnson said they're having very, very, very healthy dialogue that he said so far in terms of player acquisition. I was also interested to hear him talk about the analytics. Lots have been made about, who is Ben Johnson as a person. We know he's this genius offensive mind, but is he like this nerd? Is he in the class? He's like, listen, I got a healthy respect for analytics. He says, I use it to help make decisions as a tool, not only with game management, but also long-term, big picture in terms of player acquisition and how they want to go about attacking defenses. Some people hear analytics and they get turned off by it. Some people are like, no, I think it's really, really cool. Me, myself, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think there's a balance between utilizing the analytics, but also having a feel for the game and not strictly going by what the numbers say. And I'll be interested to see how he kind of deploys his use of analytics as the Bears move not only into the roster building phase, but on into game planning and game management.
Yeah, you want to see like those 4th down situations where you saw Detroit go for it so many times. Is now going to be implemented here in Chicago, and also maybe going for 2 points as opposed to a traditional extra point. Like those are all going to be factors, and I think the analytics play a huge part of what Ben Johnson and his staff are going to want to do as the season, slowly approaches here in 2025.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, this combine is here. We will be here, steady bringing y'all the latest from here in Indianapolis. We'll be talking to players personnel as the week goes along, and then the players themselves will get here as they continue to make their case for why they should be the Bears or any other team's next draft pick. That is Nick Moriano. I am Herb Howard from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Sus.